Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Fowler, and I'm with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Office of Climate Change. In this video, I'll discuss the upcoming June 1st, 2025 reporting requirements under recently amended Regulation Part 494, and more specifically Subpart 2, the Refrigerant Management Program. I'll briefly discuss what it is, and then get into who it impacts and how to register the required information under the program with DEC. Part 494 is a recently amended regulation titled Hydrofluorocarbon Standards and Reporting. Part 494 adopts prohibitions and other controls for hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs, and other greenhouse gases in air conditioning and refrigeration equipment, aerosol products, and foam products. The text of the rule, or the express terms of Part 494, are available on DEC's Climate Change Regulatory Revisions webpage at the link and QR code on this slide. We will reference page numbers and sections of Part 494 throughout this video. Part 494 has two subparts. This video covers Subpart 2, the Refrigerant Management Program, or RMP. The RMP establishes, in part, reporting requirements for owners or operators of certain refrigeration or air conditioning equipment, as well as some requirements for supermarket chains. So who specifically does Subpart 2 apply to? It applies to any owner or operator of refrigeration or air conditioning equipment containing regulated substances that exceed the compliance threshold indicated in the table shown on this slide. This table can be found on page 50 of the express terms. An owner is defined as any holder of a leasehold interest in a facility with equipment that is subject to this part, any holder of any portion of the legal or equitable title of a facility with equipment that is subject to this part, or any holder of a leasehold interest in a facility with equipment that is subject to this part. And an operator is any person having operational control of a facility which is subject to this part. Subpart 2 also applies to supermarket chains, and that has a specific definition. Supermarket chains are defined as a business entity owning or operating 20 or more retail food facilities that contain supermarket systems with a refrigerant charge capacity of 200 pounds or greater in New York, or that operates more than 100 such facilities in the United States, including New York. There are several sections in the RMP, but this video will focus on the sections that require action by June 1st, 2025. This includes section 494 2.2, registration and labeling, and section 494 2.8, the supermarket refrigerant program. We'll start with the RMP registration and labeling requirements in section 2.2. There is a June 1st, 2025 registration and labeling deadline for owners or operators of large commercial stationary refrigeration or air conditioning equipment. Large equipment is defined as equipment with a refrigerant charge capacity greater than or equal to 1,500 pounds of a regulated substance. Owners of medium and small equipment sizes defined as those between 50 and 1,499 pounds of refrigerant charge capacity do not have the same compliance dates for this section of the RMP, but will have to register at later dates. We certainly encourage anyone that can to register as soon as possible rather than wait until those deadlines. This is particularly the case if entities would like DEC to check any of the submitted information in advance of the compliance deadlines. This registration and labeling requirement is a one-time requirement. There are other separate annual reporting requirements that have later compliance dates. Supermarket chains will also have other compliance requirements on or before June 1st, 2025, and we'll discuss those later in this video. Owners and operators of the regulated equipment outlined earlier must register and provide facility information to DEC. This includes all of the information here on this slide, the name of the owner and operator, the federal tax ID number or employer ID number, the NAICS code, the name of the facility, including a store number or other numerical identifier, which we'll talk about more later, the facility's mailing address and physical address, facility contact information, and lastly, any information on ownership transfer. Registration also requires information on the refrigeration or air conditioning equipment. This includes an identification number that can be assigned by the equipment owner or operator, the equipment type, whether it's refrigeration or air conditioning, and subsector, the equipment manufacturer name, equipment model, model year, and 4-digit year that the refrigerant circuit was completed if it was field charged, the equipment serial number if it's available, temperature classification for refrigeration equipment, refrigerant charge capacity, and we have a slide on this next. Information on automatic leak detection devices or systems installed, information on specific equipment components, the regulated substances used, and a copy of the required label that we'll also discuss in a moment. So there's a few different ways that a registrant can determine the refrigerant charge capacity. So here on the slide, we have the definition from the rule of refrigerant charge capacity or full refrigerant charge or full charge capacity. Any of these methodologies to determine that are acceptable. This is right in the rule, and we'll have this slide here for folks to refer to. For the labeling requirements in Section 2.2, owners and operators of regulated equipment must ensure that a label is affixed to the equipment in the facility such that the information can be easily produced upon request. The label must include any regulated substances currently contained in the equipment as a refrigerant, the 4-digit year on which the equipment was manufactured or if field charged when the refrigerant circuit was completed, and the refrigerant charge capacity. The label must be located somewhere accessible, like on the equipment itself, or where a manager or other person that is available at the facility at all times would be able to produce it by request. Next, we'll move on to Section 494.2.8, the Supermarket Refrigerant Program, and discuss applicability and registration requirements. The Supermarket Refrigerant Program applies to supermarket chains that are required to report annually per Section 494.2.6 of the rule. As a reminder, a supermarket chain is defined as a business entity owning or operating 20 or more retail food facilities that contain supermarket systems with a refrigerant charge capacity of 200 pounds or greater in New York, or that operates more than 100 such facilities in the United States, including in New York. This requirement is separate from the registration and labeling requirements for facilities, so we'll describe the different options supermarkets have for reporting this various information in a subsequent slide. If you are a supermarket chain that is required to participate in the Supermarket Refrigerant Program, you must report the following information on or before the June 1st, 2025 deadline. Supermarket chains are required to report the information here shown on the slide, including business entity name, federal tax ID number, mailing address, location or physical address, business entity contact information, and then the store name and contact information for each retail food facility with equipment subject to this part and under ownership or operational control of the business entity. One of the questions we've seen already is related to what information a supermarket chain has to report under Section 2.2, which we just finished discussing. While Section 2.8 requires chains to report the name and contact information for each retail food facility, all of those with equipment that has a charge capacity over 200 pounds. Only those facilities with equipment over that 1,500 pound or large equipment threshold are subject to the June 1st, 2025 deadlines under Section 2.2. However, again, we do encourage anyone that can to register information on facilities and equipment as early as possible, both under Section 2.2 and 2.8. Another important point of clarification is around the federal tax ID number. For this section under the SRP, we are looking for the tax ID of that, quote, parent company, the business entity with ownership or operational control of the entire chain. When registering facility and equipment information under the registration and labeling section, or 2.2, each facility will be asked for its individual federal tax ID number. Now let's discuss how DEC is collecting this information and where to find these forms, so how to register and report. Reporting and registration for the RMP and SRP is required to be completed with an online form that can be accessed on the DEC website. These forms are on a platform called NForm and are available directly on DEC's Part 494, 495 requirements for suppliers and owners or operators webpage. They can also be navigated to from DEC's general NForm webpage. These pages have all the instructions and forms for submitting required registration and reporting and will be home to any additional guidance developed by DEC for Part 494. You will be required to have a personal ny.gov account to log into NForm. If you don't have an ny.gov account, one can be created using the instructions on this slide or by following the prompts on the NForm webpage. As outlined in DEC's NForm instructions, users should consider creating an ny.gov account using their work email address or a shared work email address to submit forms on behalf of a business entity. A shared email may be helpful, so if an employee leaves, other employees can take over the task using the same ny.gov account. Once you are successfully logged into the NForm portal, you'll select Office of Climate Change to navigate to the correct form. You'll see that there's only one NForm that regulated entities can select to register for the RMP and or the SRP. You click that box to access the form. You'll then see an instructions page that will introduce the reporting requirements for Part 494. Please do take the time to read the instructions before moving forward. It isn't easy to navigate back to this specific page once you begin your form. The right side of the screen displays a lot of helpful information like contact information for the Office of Climate Change and a series of links to different resources, including the express terms of the rule. We recommend opening and saving these links before you begin the form for easy reference. Once you have saved any resources you may want, click that Begin Form Entry button at the bottom of the page to begin the registration process. Whether you need to submit registration for registration and labeling under the RMP, for the supermarket refrigerant program, or for both, registrants will complete one version of this form, which is selected in the registrant category section. This is the very first section of the form. The options are intended to allow some flexibility in how registrants submit information. One thing to note here is that the registrant categories refer to the registration and labeling requirements under section 2.2 as the quote RMP. While we know that the express terms include the SRP as part of that overall subpart, that's referred to separately here. The first two forms are for entities that are only required to submit information for the RMP under section 2.2 and are not considered a supermarket chain or part of one. These are owners and operators of large refrigeration and air conditioning equipment in any type of facility, including independent retail food. The first form is for registering an individual facility, while the second is for registration of multiple facilities. With either of these, the registrant can provide information for multiple pieces of equipment. So for example, if you have one facility with multiple pieces of equipment, you can choose the first form. The third form is intended for use by a corporate or other similar business entity with ownership or operational control over a supermarket chain. This form would be used to register all supermarkets within a supermarket chain for the SRP or section 2.8. Here's a reminder of what that information looks like. And then the fourth form is for completing the SRP and the Refrigerant Management Program registration for multiple retail food facilities. This form would be completed again by a corporate or other similar business entity with ownership or operational control of the supermarket chain. Again, that June 1st, 2025 deadline only requires the registration of equipment over 1,500 pounds, but you may choose to register all equipment early. And finally, the fifth form is for completing just the facility and equipment RMP information for an individual retail food facility as part of a supermarket chain. So for example, a corporate or other similar business entity could register the chain under the SRP with Form 3, but the individual retail food facilities could use Form 5 to submit information on the facility and equipment for their own individual store. Once you choose the appropriate registrant category, you will see the various sections that are required to be completed for each of those. Some of these forms are very similar to one another. They're all collecting the same kinds of information. It's just dependent on who is submitting the information. You'll notice that all the forms end with a review and signing section before the final submission. We put together some examples of which registrant categories you might select based on your registration needs. In the first example here, the registrant operates a single ice rink that uses large equipment. They'll need to register for the RMP only, and we'll select that. Complete the RMP registration for an individual facility form. In the second example, the registrant operates a grocery store that uses large equipment. Because they're not part of a defined supermarket chain under the rule, they will also register for the RMP only and select that same first form. In the third example, the registrant has operational control over a supermarket chain. This entity will compile all supermarket business entity and individual facility and equipment information. This means they'll select Form 4 to register information for the SRP and registration and labeling. In the fourth example here, the registrar operates multiple buildings and they each have large air conditioning equipment. This registrant would complete the RMP using Form 2 to complete the RMP registration for multiple facilities. In the fifth example, the user operates a chain of retail food facilities. There are 12 stores in New York. This does not fall within Part 494's definition of a supermarket chain, so the registrant would complete the RMP only using Form 2 to complete the RMP registration for multiple facilities. In the sixth example, the user has operational control of the supermarket chain, and some of their locations have large equipment. The operator prefers that these facilities register for the RMP separately. So in this case, the operator will be required to complete registration for the SRP using Form 3, and then each individual facility within the chain would then need to complete Form 5 to register the individual retail food facility as part of a supermarket chain in order to register that large equipment. Then in the final example here, the registrant owns a retail food facility that uses large equipment and is part of a supermarket chain. The owner would complete Form 5 to register their large equipment. And then this is where it would be necessary to coordinate a bit with that entity, that business entity that has ownership or operational control over the chain to discuss which option the chain and or the stores prefer. So once you've decided which form fulfills your reporting needs, it's time to fill it out. So we'll go over some tips and helpful reminders to assist you as you navigate NForm. Coming back to the identifiers, so within each form, the facility identifier and the store identifier will be crucial for accurate registration and reporting. These identifiers will help to match information submitted between different sections of the registration forms, or in some cases between different form submissions. The identifier links the facility with the equipment that's within it. It also helps simplify the registration process by avoiding repetitive entry of different addresses and contact information for each section. So the registrant will provide the facility information, including the identifier, and then use the identifier in the table or section where the equipment information is requested to match those up. These identifiers must be numeric, and they can be anywhere from 1 to 5 digits long. So retail chains may already have a numeric identifier system in place for their stores, store number 92, for example. And we recommend using that same identifier for these forms as you would for other business processes. So in the event that entities with multiple facilities don't have a numeric identification system in place, you can use whatever makes sense for your business. However, it's important that this information is recorded and the same identifiers are used for other reporting under Part 494. For folks that are going to register for the supermarket refrigerant program separately from the registration labeling requirements, it's especially crucial for that coordination of the store identifiers so that we can match the information submitted across forms. The form will prompt users to acknowledge the importance of using the same store identifiers for individual equipment registration before users can complete the SRP registration process. Here's that acknowledgement on the screen here. Once you're in the form, you can use the left sidebar here to navigate between sections of the form. You can use the Save Progress button at any time. This is always located in the top right of the form, no matter which section you're in. If you have any questions about a field, you can hover over the title of that field with your mouse and a small blue info button will appear. When you hover your mouse over that blue eye, a text box will pop up to provide further clarification, either helpful tips, definitions, or noting where to find more information in the rule if applicable. While hovering over cells in a table, you can simply hover over the field for these help tips. Required fields will be noted with a red asterisk or in the data tables by a red triangle with an exclamation point. You will not be able to submit the form without completing these required fields. Sometimes you may need to hover over the field to see instructions on what to enter if it does not apply to your entry, like if you need to just submit not applicable or something similar. Errors in the form are noted by a red triangle with an exclamation point inside. Sometimes this will pop up only when a field has been filled out incorrectly or skipped, whereas other times, like within cells in a table, the error symbol may appear from the start until the cells are filled in correctly. A feature you will encounter in the forms are these tables or data grids. These mimic the design of a spreadsheet, and you can input information directly into the table to register multiple facilities or equipment, or you can use tools like full screen to view a larger version of the table. And you can also use next error to navigate between cells that need attention. You can also, of course, save progress at any time as needed and return to it later. You can also download an Excel version of the table. This may be an especially helpful tool for gathering information for multiple facilities. So to do that, you click that download button here, spend the time that you need collecting information, and then upload the completed Excel file once you're ready. Some of the data grid cells are drop downs or only accept certain formats. So that doesn't come through nicely to Excel. So take a little time with the data grid in the form itself to look for those drop downs so you know what the table will accept. The downloaded spreadsheet will have two tabs, one for the requested information titled Data Entry, and then another tab titled Reference, where users can find more detailed instructions for each form field, which is the same information as the help tips that you see when you hover over the individual cells. Here's a closer look. When you download the data grid to the Excel format, it's designed to provide basic instructions to users when they hover over the blue column headers seen in the image here. These blue headers are also links that, when clicked, will bring users to that reference tab where the field will be highlighted, and you can see the additional information like the field name and help and instructions. Once all the information is ready, you click that upload button in the end form and select the right file. Make sure you saved the changes in the Excel file. And then in the event that the data entered in the Excel sheet does not match the data requested by the end form field, don't worry, the form will still upload and it will flag the cells that need attention with that error symbol. So here's an example of where that might come into play. Instead of typing air conditioning, which is a drop-down option in the table, you typed AC. And it will show up here with an error, and you would just click that to show the drop-downs and change it to what is the matching option. That can similarly happen with equipment subsector, which is another drop-down option. So once you're done with all of the data entry, you're just a few clicks away from submitting the form. So let's take a look at those final steps. Once you get to the review page, you'll get a chance to review all the sections and ensure there's no errors. Errors will appear here in the same way they appeared in the individual sections with that red triangle. You'll need to return to the previous sections to correct any of those errors. Once you've done that, if you need to, it may be a good time to save a copy of your submission for your records. You could do this now or later. So to do it at this stage, you would click on the Print Review button if you'd like to save a copy of your submission. If you want to print a physical copy instead of save a digital copy, please note that some of the information won't print nicely. Table entries will need to be opened separately for printing. So once you're ready to sign and submit, you can click Next Section, Signing at the bottom. When you complete your review and reach the signing page, you should be ready to submit. As long as you filled out all the required fields correctly, you should see all the sections of the form showing that blue check mark on the left side panel. If you missed anything, you'll see red sections in the left side panel, as well as a red box at the bottom that requires users to correct any missing or invalid fields before they're able to sign. In the event that any fields are left blank or with errors, the form will display this error message and you won't be allowed to submit until they've been completed or corrected. The certification statement here is your official attestation. By checking this box and clicking sign, you're officially certifying your submissions according to the statement. At this time, you'll be prompted to print your submission confirmation. You can access your submission later if you need to revise or obtain information already submitted. In order to access the data submitted in the tables, you'll need to click View Submission and either print or save a copy of the submission digitally with links to access those tables. Or you could also view submission and then click Download/Export. A pop-up box will appear with parts of the form that you may want to download. You can select all and click Download, and a zip file will be downloaded with access to your form information, table data in an Excel file, and any attachments that you submitted. We hope this helps with submitting information pursuant to the Refrigerant Management Program. To submit questions, attestations, or other materials in writing, send an email to climate.regs at dec.ny.gov or by mail to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Office of Climate Change. You can also sign up for our distribution list for future updates. To end, we'll leave you with some QR codes and links to the web pages referenced in this webinar. Thanks for watching.